Chapter 6. Miranda's life fell into a pattern after that. On Tuesdays, Bob came over and they ate together and watched Lazy Love. On Fridays, she made kolaches. And every morning, there was a new gift-wrapped box outside the door of the bakery. On December 19th, which was a Sunday, she and Bob worked in the bakery all day, getting her normal baking done for Monday, so she could focus on baking cookies all day Monday. On Monday night, she would lead the big cookie decorating party in the event barn. Bob watched her as she did each thing, learning from her. "I feel like I know how to bake, because I cook, but some of your techniques are very different. And the pies, why do you need so many pies? People all want pies during the holidays. I'm not sure why. Holidays are about cookies and pies. What about fruitcake?" She wrinkled her nose. "Only fruitcakes eat fruitcake. I guess I should probably make you one, huh?" In response, he grabbed her around the waist from behind, raspberrying her neck. She squealed. "Nothing more than you deserved," he said, grinning as he got back to work. She made a face at him, continuing to roll out crusts for pies. "You should make some meat pies." "Do you make meat pies?" He nodded. "I have a wonderful Cajun meat pie recipe I should make this week." He frowned. "Would you be willing to make some extra pie crust? Like enough for another 40 pies? It would be tough, but she could make it work." "Let's do that today. We're going to be here late, I think." He shrugged. "As long as I'm spending time with you, I don't care what we do." He noticed that the new charms from the week had been added to her bracelet. She was never without it these days. By the time everything was ready to be baked the next morning, and the pie dough was ready for his meat pie special that week, and the dough was ready to be rolled out and baked, they were both exhausted. He slipped his arm around her as she locked the door. "Do you want to go to the restaurant tonight? Or we could try that new place in town?" "I don't think I have it in me to cook tonight," he said. She smiled. "I think the restaurant. My stomach is a little upset because it's been on a steady diet of cookie dough all day. And you throwing that lump of dough at me was unacceptable." They started walking across the ranch toward the restaurant. He laughed. "Admit it. It was fun." She shook her head at him. "I never have that much fun when I work alone. We really should open our own restaurant and pie shop. Imagine how much we could make." Miranda frowned. "We probably could, but then we wouldn't be part of River's End Ranch. I love working there. I feel like I'm part of a big family." "I know. I'm just daydreaming. Do you really have a desire to strike out on your own?" "I think everyone does to some extent. I love the Westons, and my job is exactly what I want a job to be. I just sometimes want absolute freedom." She nodded emphatically. "Me too. And then I think about all the hoops I'd have to jump through to run my own place, and I'm suddenly content working on the ranch." He laughed. "Me too. Of course, if we had our own place we wouldn't have to listen to Kelsey talk about Winifred." "Why Winifred?" Miranda asked. She usually understood where Kelsey's names for the baby were coming from. But Winifred? So she's got a W name like all the male Westons. She thinks she'll feel like more of a family member with a W name. That's pretty decent Kelsey logic. They reached the restaurant, and he opened the door for her. The first person she noticed was Jacqueline sitting at a table with her friend Simon. Miranda raised her hand in a wave. Jacqueline got to her feet and hurried over to Bob and Miranda. "Is everything all set for the cookie decorating tomorrow night? Should I bring some snickerdoodles?" Miranda smiled. "No, everything's all set. I'm making sugar cookies and gingerbread people." "Men and women?" Miranda nodded emphatically. "And children." I even have dog and bunny cookie cutters, so there might be a few gingerbread canines and rabbits floating around. They're not made yet? Jacqueline asked with a frown. The dough is made, and I'll spend all day tomorrow rolling out the cookies and baking them. I want them to be as fresh as possible for the event tomorrow night. I'm so excited to be leading an event this year. I'll stop by to make sure you're working hard tomorrow. Jacqueline nodded at Miranda's bracelet. Very pretty. Your secret Santa must really care about you. Miranda blushed, looking down at the bracelet. It had veered away from all the baking charms of the week before, and now it was so much more. There was the heart, a dog that looked suspiciously like Cinnamon, a book, and a sewing machine. Whoever was doing this knew her very well, or knew how to get people to reveal information about her. He must. I love it. She couldn't look at Bob while she talked about it, for fear she'd see that he was disappointed with her. As they were led to a small table, she looked down at the bracelet. It was getting full, and she loved it a little more each day. After their dinner, Bob drove her home, holding her hand for a moment before getting out of the car. Do you want to come in? Miranda asked. He shook his head. I'm too tired to go in, but I don't want to let you go yet either. Today was the first day we really worked together, and I think we make a really good team. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. I think so too. It's hard to believe we haven't been working together for years. He slipped his hand behind her neck, under her hair, and tipped her face up to his for a kiss. Dream of me. Miranda sighed softly. I'd dreamed of nothing else for weeks. Bob grinned at her. You know? I needed to hear that. He got out of the Jeep and walked her to the door, kissing her one last time, lingering longer this time. How many times have we been out together now? She shrugged. I have no idea. More than 5? I think so. I'm not sure. Let me know when it's been long enough. I don't understand. You said we couldn't talk about marriage until we'd been on 5 dates, and preferably 6. Remember? She smiled. I guess I remember that. Good night, beautiful. Bob touched her cheek one last time before going back to his Jeep and leaving. She stood watching him go for a moment. Whoever would have thought she'd fall in love with a Bob? Miranda let Cinnamon outside and gave her fresh food and water. The dog brought her a favorite stuffed toy to throw. Even Cinnamon seemed a little dejected on days that Bob didn't come over. She wasn't sure who was falling harder, her or her dog. When she closed her eyes to sleep that night, Bob's face was there on the inside of her eyelids. She dreamed of him as she always did. Asterisk. Miranda was even busier than usual the following day. Pastor Kevin was there at 3 to help her, and he brought his new wife Bridget along. Bridget was yawning widely, but she was ready and willing to work. Miranda rolled out the clumps of dough and used the cookie cutter, leaving the other 2 to pick up the cookies and put them on the cookie sheets to bake. Bob came in and picked up the cookies they'd baked for him the day before, nodding at Pastor Kevin. Miranda had forgotten that the 2 of them were good friends. Sorry I couldn't bring them by, Miranda said. You've got enough on your hands today, just making all those cookies happen. Bob took the box and waved. I'll pick you up at 6. The decorating starts at 7. Will that give you enough time to get everything ready? Miranda nodded. At any other time of year, she'd just stay there on the ranch and nap, but they were booked to capacity for Christmas. There were a lot of families that came back for the Christmas festivities year after year. After the first couple of rounds, they had a system in place, and it went quickly. The only time they were slowed down at all was when someone came in to buy something. That was the hard part. At 10, Bridget had enough. I'm calling Kaye in to deal with customers. She probably just went to bed, but she'll live. Don't wake her. Miranda protested. She liked Bridget's sister, but she knew she wrote all night while other people slept. Bridget ignored her and made the call. Kaya, we need you to run the cash register at the bakery today. Yes, I know I don't work at the bakery. Okay, see you in 20. Bridget tucked the phone back into her pocket. She's on her way. The bell over the door rang and Miranda went to the counter. Hi, Matt. What are you hungry for today? What's going on? Matt asked. You never have a bakery full of helpers. We're kicking off the ranch's Christmas week activities with cookie decorating tonight. So in addition to my usual holiday baking, I need to get all the cookies ready. We're expecting about 100 people, and each one typically decorates a dozen cookies. So we're baking 1,200 cookies today. Matt blinked. That's a lot of cookies. His eyes locked onto her bracelet. Beautiful bracelet. Miranda stroked it absently. It's from my secret Santa. What can I get you today? Matt studied her for a moment before responding. I'll take 2 blueberry muffins and 2 orange muffins. No kolaches today? There was no time around cookie baking. I'm planning on kolaches on Wednesday this week. Like everyone else on the ranch, Matt had developed a soft spot for her kolaches. I'll see you Wednesday then. And tomorrow, of course. He winked at her and left the bakery, and she turned, noticing that Bridget was staring at her. What? Miranda asked. Who was that? Bridget asked. She returned to working, but her mind was clearly still on Miranda and that man who had come to talk to her. Matt. He's here until the end of the year. He comes every morning for a treat, and he takes it to the saloon and has some of the fancy coffee with it. Miranda hurried back to work, cutting out more of the cookies. Are you interested in him? Bridget asked, seeming concerned. I'm going out with Bob. How could I be interested in Matt? As her bracelet jangled on her wrist, she felt guilt wash over her. Who was giving her the gifts? Bob hadn't mentioned the bracelet at all, and Matt hadn't seemed affected when she said it was from a secret Santa. Did he know who it was from? Kaya burst through the door. What's the big emergency? I didn't get to bed until 7. You didn't have to come. Miranda protested. I told Bridget not to call you. Do you have that much to do? Kaya asked. Miranda sighed. We really do. I'm going to need to nap every day this week if I want to get up as early as I need to and still participate in the evening activities. So, we could use the help. Kaya walked behind the counter. Where can I get an apron then? Miranda spent 5 minutes showing the girl how to use her cash register and showing her where the price list was. If you have questions, just ask. I will. And when I'm not helping customers, how can I help with the cookies? Miranda looked around the bakery. Could you get the cookies that are cooled into the boxes that I have on that table over there? She asked, pointing at a table she didn't usually use. That would speed things up just a bit. I'd be happy to. Bridget pulled a tiny shrimp fork from her pocket and waved it at her sister. Miranda sighed, looking at Pastor Kevin. Do you think they're going to be able to behave enough to actually be of help today? Or are they just going to get on my nerves? Your guess is as good as mine. Want me to pray you have patience? Miranda laughed. That might be the best offer I've had all day. When it was time for the bakery to close, all of the cookies were stacked in boxes. Miranda smiled. We did it. I'm going to call the front desk and have someone deliver these things. That was a lot of cookies. She had just finished mixing up 8 big 5-gallon containers of icing. She'd even made 2 5-gallon containers of cream cheese frosting. She'd probably gone overboard, but there would be children, and there was no telling how much frosting would go on the cookies and how much would go in the mouths. There were 4 containers of white, 2 red, and 2 green. She'd made a 3-gallon container of black. She also had gallon containers of sprinkles in several colors. Everything was on the table and ready to be carried off to be used that evening. She was glad her night was upon them, because after it was over, she'd be able to enjoy the festivities and not stress. You guys go. And thank you so much for your help today. I'll make sure that Wade knows who all helped. Kaya shrugged. Don't tell him about me. I'm not even an employee of the ranch. I'm telling him about everyone. Miranda hugged the twins in turn. You guys are awesome. She watched them leave before calling the front desk to get everything moved. She couldn't believe they'd actually gotten it all done. Asterisk. Miranda tried to nap when she got home that afternoon, but she wasn't used to sleeping during the day. Instead, she closed her eyes for a while and then she read a little, and she worried a lot about how things would go that evening. Lily's band would be playing Christmas songs in the background, so that was taken care of. Punch was going to be provided by Kelsey. She couldn't think of anything else they needed, but she was still nervous. She'd never had to coordinate an event quite this big. Of course, she wasn't really coordinating it, but she was providing the cookies, and she would move from table to table, showing the guests different techniques she used to decorate, and she had to do a couple of samples when she got there. Why hadn't she done that today? She took deep breaths. She hadn't had time, and she knew it. Glancing at the clock, she saw that Bob would be there in a few minutes, and she was glad. As nervous as she was, it was best to just get the whole thing over with. She changed into jeans and a long-sleeved t-shirt, and grabbed her favorite blue gingham apron. Her mother had made it for her when she'd announced she was going to be a baker, and it had always been special. Maybe tonight it would give her the confidence she needed to make it through the experience. She let Cinnamon out back just as the doorbell rang. She hurried to the door and let Bob in, and then ran back through the house to herd Cinnamon inside. The dog was ecstatic to see her favorite man, and she let him know it. You ready? Bob asked. Miranda nodded. As ready as I'm going to get. You're really nervous about this, aren't you? I am. I've never done anything like this before. I know my cookies are good, but I don't know how people will like the setup I have in mind. And we still have to go and get the frosting divided into the cups I prepared. I was told to prepare for 100 guests. What if we only have 50? What if we have 200? Bob caught her and kissed her. Calm down. The only thing that matters is you do your best. And there will be no doubt in anyone's mind that you've done all you can do to make it perfect. She sighed. I know. I'm being a nervous mess. I have to stop. She grabbed her apron and headed for the door, calling to Cinnamon over her shoulder, "Be good girl." When they got to the event barn, Miranda sprang into action. There were 10 volunteers there waiting for her, more than she'd expected. She put her apron on and started dividing the frosting into the different cups. Each person would get a cup of white, a cup of cream cheese, and half cups of red and green. Then each table would share a cup of black. She'd arranged to have 20 tables with 8 chairs each, hoping they wouldn't all be needed. The cookies were laid out, and each person would get to choose their 12 favorites to decorate. Bob helped her divide things up, and the volunteers took the cups of frosting to the tables. Lily and the band came to set up, and the Westons all came in a little before 7, each one with their spouse, except Danny and Wade, who weren't yet married. When everyone was there, and people were seated, the excitement was almost palpable. Wade had to borrow Lily's microphone to be heard. I'm so glad everyone is here to help us kick off the Christmas week festivities here at River's End Ranch. I know Miranda has put a lot of work into making over 1,000 cookies to decorate, and she's going to give a brief demonstration of different techniques you can use. Let's all give her a hand to thank her for the extra time she put in to make this event memorable for all of us. Miranda blushed and took a deep breath. She took the microphone Wade offered her and thanked everyone for coming. She showed them a couple of different ways to use the materials on hand, and then she told everyone to pick 10 cookies each. They had ended up with more people than she planned for, so she was glad she'd made such a generous amount of cookies. She moved from table to table, sitting with the different groups and answering questions. Bob was moving around from table to table as well. She had explained what she'd be teaching, and he'd claimed he was more than capable. He was a chef after all. By the time they ushered the last guest out at 9:30, Miranda was exhausted, but happier than she'd imagined she'd be. Kelsey hurried to her and hugged her. "You did so good. I heard everyone talking about how much fun this was, and they hope we'll do it every Christmas." Miranda felt tears spring to her eyes. She felt silly, but she'd worked so hard for that night, and it was finally over. And it had been a success. She'd done well. Bob walked over and slipped his arm around her waist. "Let's get out of here." "Great job, but I know you've been up a whole lot longer than you should have been. Tomorrow night we have the snowmobile races." Miranda smiled. "At least I'm not in charge." Wade patted her on the back. "Go on home. Everything will be washed and back in the bakery before you work tomorrow." "Good job." Miranda liked Wade, but she was still a little intimidated by him. "Thanks." Bob led her out to his Jeep, and she rested her head on the back of the seat, fighting to stay awake. What a night. I hope you know how much everyone enjoyed the evening. You really did a good job. Thanks for everything you did to make me look good. All I did was help shine a little light on you. You were already beautiful." Miranda blushed, pleased with everything that had happened. "Thanks for the ride. I'll see you in the morning with cookies." Bob kissed her softly at her door. "Dream of me." She sighed as she let herself inside. Of course she'd dream of him. He laughed. "I know they did. You were busy last night and didn't hear all the people exclaiming about how excited they were there was a bakery on the grounds. We've been here almost a year. You were here at this time last year from what I understand, but didn't you wait until January 1st to open? These are people who come every year, but the bakery is new to them." Miranda smiled. "I guess I'm on the map now." She took the apron he handed her. "I'll count the money and close up shop. Thank you so much for your help today. I was walking toward the church, and I saw a line out the door. I figured you might need a bit of help." "You were right. Make sure to tell Wade how long you worked today." Pastor Kevin shrugged. "You do tell Wade when you help people, don't you?" Miranda shook her head. "You have a right to be paid for the work you do. I don't need more money. I just like to help people. It's part of being a pastor. Now, I'm going to go home to my beautiful wife for a little while before the snowmobile races. Tell Bridget hi for me." "I will." He raised his hand in a wave and headed out the door. When Miranda sat down and counted out the money, she realized that she'd pulled in what she usually made in 2 weeks in a single day. No wonder she was exhausted. There was little left in the refrigerator. She'd have to get up early tomorrow to get extra prepared. Next year she'd know better, but this year, Christmas was kicking her butt. When she finally got to her house, she remembered Bob was meeting her there. She parked her VW next to his Jeep and hurried to his vehicle, knocking on the window. She wasn't at all surprised to see that he was sleeping. "I'm so sorry. Today was super busy. Now that people know there's a bakery on the ranch, they're lining up around the building. Pastor Kevin saved my derriere. I'm so glad. It's one of my favorite parts of you." Miranda blushed, shocked that he'd say that. "Bob." He laughed. "I brought supper. Let's eat something." She glanced at the time on her phone and realized it was half an hour later than she usually got home. She'd have to eat quickly if she was going to be able to nap for as long as she needed to. Hurrying to let Cinnamon out, she waved her hand toward the kitchen. You know where everything is. Go ahead and set the table. I'll be right back. Bob went to the kitchen and got out plates for the chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes he'd made at the cafe. I hope you're hungry, he said as she walked back in. Miranda nodded, sitting down at the table. I didn't even have a chance for lunch, I was so busy today. Thank God for Pastor Kevin. She sighed. I'm going to have to go in early tomorrow, because they absolutely cleaned me out. Wow. You already get there at 3. She nodded. Yeah. She hid a yawn behind her hand. I'm going to remember this next year, and I won't be caught unprepared again. I'll meet you there at 3. 4 hands are better than 2. You already have to get up super early. I can't ask you to do that. I don't have to be at the cafe until 4. I can help you for an hour before I have to go in. It means I get to have you for the evening if I'm willing to help you in the morning. She smiled, slipping her hand into his. You'd have me tonight anyway. I'm not going to miss the Christmas festivities. As soon as they'd finished eating, Bob pushed her toward her bedroom. I'm going to nap on the couch as soon as I finish the dishes. She looked at him for a moment, thinking about protesting, but the truth was, he'd slept more than her. I'll take Cinnamon so she doesn't get in your way. Thanks, Bob. She called the dog and slid into bed, still wearing her baker's uniform. She set her phone to wake her at 6:15, and she was asleep as soon as her eyes were closed. Bob puttered in the kitchen, doing the dishes and cleaning up the small mess he'd made. He collapsed on the couch, pulling the Afghan from the back of the couch over him. He'd heard about how crazy busy it was at the ranch on Christmas since he'd arrived, but seeing it with his own eyes was something different entirely. They must not have a single room vacant, judging by the number of people in the cafe that day. He closed his eyes. Asterisk. Miranda woke to her alarm and bounced out of bed, trying to remember for a moment why she was sleeping in her uniform. She changed into jeans and her favorite pair of cowboy boots. She wore a red sweater to match the boots, and she hated that she'd have to wear a coat and mess up how well they matched. Walking into the living room, she knelt beside the couch, putting her hand on Bob's arm to wake him. Bob? It's time to go. Bob woke, rubbing his eyes sleepily, his hands going to her shoulders and pulling her in for a kiss. Waking up to your kisses is something I could get used to, he said softly, stroking her cheek. She smiled, getting to her feet. We can't be late. I have to get the cookies all set out before the racers have finished. Cookies? You didn't say anything about cookies. Cookies and hot chocolate tonight. I'm not sure who's providing the hot chocolate, but the cookies are my contribution. How many cookies are you going to bake this week? He asked. No idea. I don't think 5,000 is unrealistic. I'm selling them in the bakery. I did 1,200 yesterday for the event, and I made another 500 today for the race. People are going to be sick of cookies by the time the week is over. Sick of your cookies? No way. No one makes better cookies than you. She smiled, pulling her coat on. You're kind to flatter me, but it's just cookies. Once they got to the ranch, she rushed to set up tables of cookies near the end of the circuitous route Danny had set up, and then she simply enjoyed herself. Asterisk. After the races, Bob drove Miranda home. Your cookies were a big hit again. Who was that guy who came over to talk to you? Matt? He's just a guest at the ranch. He comes in for a muffin or kolache every morning. Bob waited for her to say more, but when she didn't, he frowned. Have you two become close? Not really. We talk when he comes in, but it's not like he's grabbing me and kissing me or anything. I'm not sure why he's here so long. He said something about a sabbatical. How long has he been on the ranch? Miranda frowned, trying to remember. First or second week in December, I think. I haven't paid that much attention. I just get him what he orders. She thought about telling him she thought he was giving her secret Santa gifts, but she didn't want to speak out of turn. If the gifts were really from Bob, would it hurt his feelings if she attributed them to someone else? And what about the bug? It did look an awful lot like a chigger. I see. Well, he seems like a nice guy. Seems to be. I don't really know. She realized she was hiding something from him, and she didn't want to do that. He did ask me out when he first got here, but I told him no. Why? She shrugged. Because you and I were already seeing each other, and as much as you confuse the snot out of me, I like you a lot. I wouldn't ever do anything to break your trust in me. He pulled into her driveway, and pulled her to him, kissing her softly. Thank you for telling me that. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't think he was important. He rubbed her bottom lip with his thumb. I guess I can understand that. I hate to say goodnight, but it's already 9:30. This week is going to be hard. She yawned. It already is. He walked her to the door, leaving her with a quick kiss. I'll see you at 3. Miranda watched him walk away. Would the gift be there? And how would he react? She really had no idea what he'd think of the whole thing. Unless he was the one giving them to her? Why did men have to mess with her mind so much? Who needed albino brain chiggers with men around? Asterisk. Miranda got to the bakery shortly before 3 the next morning. She was yawning, but she would work. As she approached the door, she saw her gift, and hurried inside to open it. She wasn't sure she could have opened it with Bob standing there, but she wasn't sure she could wait either. After Christmas, she was in for a real letdown, because she was getting used to finding these little gifts every day. She quickly opened it, finding another charm, as she'd suspected. This one was a small tiara. She wasn't sure what the significance of that was, but she thought it was beautiful. She slipped the gift into her purse as she quickly pulled out ingredients to start her day's baking. She'd promised collages this morning, and they took more time than most things. Maybe Bob could work on muffins while she did the collages. Bob got there exactly at 3, frowning. You were early. Why didn't you tell me to come in earlier? I just got here 10 minutes ago. It's fine. I've got muffin batter all mixed up. Would you make the muffins? She gave him careful instructions and kept working on the collages. I hope you're making lots of those. Kelsey has developed a bionic nose since she got pregnant. She's going to know that I was around collages and didn't bring her any. Miranda laughed. I'll make sure she gets some. Good. I don't want to live with the wrath of the pregnant woman. Little Winona wouldn't forgive me. Winona this week? It's the name of the hour. Miranda sighed, shaking her head. She needs to sit down with that husband of hers and come up with a name that they can both agree on. Different names every day is starting to get old. You're telling me? Some days she'll get upset about something, and she'll start wailing. Pumpernickel thinks you shorted me on bacon in that soup. And I'll stand there and stare at her like she's lost her mind, and then I realize she's calling that poor child Pumpernickel. Someday there will be a name. We just need to keep praying that Shane is the one to pick the name and not Kelsey. I don't think that girl should be allowed to name a pet gerbil. Not even one we all hate. Bob nodded emphatically. She shouldn't. Why, I wouldn't let her name a random character in a romance novel, but I think Kaya agreed to if she'd promised not to name the baby Herberta. Remind me not to read that romance novel, would you? Chapter 8. Wednesday proved to be just as busy for Miranda and the bakery as Tuesday had been. Pastor Kevin was there at open, putting on an apron and manning the register. Miranda considered kissing him for a moment, but she knew Bob and Bridget wouldn't approve. Neither would she for that matter, but she'd know what the kiss meant. The collages were gone within 30 minutes of opening the doors, and she promised to make them again Friday. Collages took several hours to be done perfectly, and she wasn't about to disappoint people with an inferior product. Friday she'd come in early, and she'd make a triple batch. Hopefully that would please everyone. Halfway through the morning rush, Miranda approached Pastor Kevin. "I'll take over. Take a break and eat a cinnamon roll. I heated one up for you, and it's on the back table." The pastor's favorite thing was cinnamon rolls, and he usually came by for one every morning. For a moment, he looked like he'd protest, but he nodded. "Thank you. I could use a break." She stepped up to the counter and smiled at Maddie, the manager of the spa, who had her daughter by the hand. She had heard Maddie was a widow, but hadn't had the pleasure of meeting her daughter yet. "Hi. I see you brought me a new customer." The little girl looked up from the book she was reading. "Hi. I'm Miranda. Didn't I see you decorating cookies the other night?" "Yes. You make the best cookies. Do you have any here?" Miranda smiled. "Well, I'm out of Christmas cookies today, which is terrible since it's a couple of days before Christmas. I'll make some more this afternoon. I have some chocolate chip cookies, some peanut butter blossoms, and some oatmeal raisin. I make those for Tony, the head of security." "Oh, I know Sheriff Tony." The little girl grinned up at her. "I'm Vivian." "It's nice to meet you, Vivian. I see you're reading Nancy Drew." "I read all of those books when I was a girl. I love Nancy Drew." Vivian looked at the bakery case. "I think I want oatmeal raisins. Can I have 3 of them, Mom?" Maddie nodded. "That's fine." She smiled at Miranda, obviously pleased that she'd pulled her daughter out of her book for a few minutes. As they were leaving, Vivian waved to Miranda. "We should eat cookies and talk about Nancy Drew sometime." Miranda grinned. "You just name the time and place, and I'll be there." As she helped customers, she realized there were a lot of people who worked at the ranch mixed in with the guests. Had they not realized she was there either? She needed to get out more and meet people. A man she'd seen around the ranch and met once or twice stopped in. "I need a couple of your orange muffins, which my sisters claim are sent from heaven, and an oatmeal raisin cookie." "Who are your sisters?" Miranda asked. His name was escaping her, and she hated that. She was terrible with names. "Dink and Ellie." "I'm Elf. We've met, but just in passing." Miranda nodded. "The new blacksmith, right?" "That's right. You do remember me." She put his treats into a bag and handed it to him across the counter, giving him a total. "It's good to see you again, and I'll remember your name next time." "If you don't, I'll just remind you again," he said with a wink. "I've been assigned the task of getting cookies to the restaurant for Christmas karaoke on Friday night." "A blacksmith who delivered cookies?" "Sure, that makes perfect sense." "It does? Well, you are an elf after all. Who better to deliver Christmas cookies?" He grinned at her. "Elves are good for all sorts of things. So I've been told. I'll have them ready on Friday afternoon. I close at 1, so if you could be here before that, it would be great." "When will they be done?" Miranda shook her head and shrugged. "No idea. By 1, but maybe not much before. It's been a rough week." Elf turned and looked at the line behind him. "I can see that. I'll be here right at 1 then." "Thank you. I appreciate you making things easy for me. I'm not the one baking thousands of cookies this week. I wouldn't mind an occasional goodie bag though." He headed toward the door. "See you tonight. Will you be at the ornament party?" "Absolutely. Where else would I be?" Miranda watched him go. He seemed like a nice man. Pastor Kevin stepped up behind her. Thank you. I needed the break, but I'm ready to take over again. Miranda smiled at him. I was thinking earlier if it wouldn't upset Bob and Bridget too much, I'd totally kiss you for all your help this week. The pastor blushed. I don't think that's necessary, but thank you for the thought. She laughed. Back to work with me. I've got cookies to bake for tonight yet. So many cookies. When the bakery closed at 1, she had every cookie finished baking and boxed, and she'd done a lot of the prep work for Thursday. Not all, because she was so much busier than she'd ever been, but a lot. She piled up the boxes of cookies for the evening's event, and rubbed the back of her neck. Pastor Kevin walked over. How can I help you get out of here faster? You've done all I could possibly ask of you. Thank you. Are you sure? I could do the dishes or something? She laughed. All done. All I have left to do today is count the money we made and make a note of what I need to fix tomorrow. And then deliver the cookies to the event barn just before the event. Sounds easy enough. Why don't I do the inventory of what you have on hand to make things a little easier, and Bridget and I will make sure the cookies get to the event barn. Then you can get a nap for a little while. Miranda bit her lip. I hate to ask that of you. You're not asking. I'll get it done quickly, and then you can concentrate on counting the money. Thank you. You've been a good friend to me. He shrugged. You've been a good friend to my wife. I can't even begin to pay you back for that. She hurried to the cash register, noting that she'd made almost as much as yesterday. Her receipts this week were amazing. If she stayed this busy after Christmas, which would be a blessing and a curse at the same time, she'd have to hire an assistant to help her out. It was ridiculous how much work was involved. Pastor Kevin brought her the list of what she had left, and she shook her head. It's a good thing we closed when we did. We're out of almost everything. I've been telling people we were out of things for the past couple of hours. What went first? Your Christmas cookies. I'd say make a double batch tomorrow. Miranda tilted her head to the side as she thought about that. Everyone who was at the party took home 10 of them. How do they want more? He laughed. Really? Most people were already down 2 or 3 cookies when they left the barn that night. A midnight snack and cookies for breakfast, and there are no cookies left. She sighed. I guess I'm making Christmas cookies tomorrow morning. Do you want help? She shook her head. You're doing enough just by taking care of customers. I can't ask you to come in at 3 with me. He nodded, but his face was thoughtful. All right. Miranda locked the door and walked to her car to find Bob leaning against it. I'm driving you home. You're dead on your feet. Miranda nodded, too tired to even protest. It was tiring last year as I was readying the bakery to be opened. This year? I feel like death. She got into his Jeep, which was parked beside her VW. I have dinner from the cafe in the back. It's just a couple of burgers, but I don't think you care at the moment. She shook her head. I really don't. I need food and sleep in that order. You need an assistant. I will make sure I have one for the holiday season next year. I'll remind you if you forget, he told her sternly. She laughed. Do you think we'll be fighting over chocolate chips or kissing at this time next year? I hope your body will resemble Kelsey's at this time next year. That woke her up. She looked over at him, surprised by his words. You mean 7 months pregnant? He shrugged. I think you'll be beautiful pregnant. You've lost your mind. For me to be 7 months pregnant by this time next year, we'd have to be married by April or so. And? Do you really think that's long enough to get to know someone well enough that you know you want to spend the rest of your life with them? She wasn't even sure what to say to that. He couldn't possibly be thinking along those lines. He stopped the Jeep as he parked in her driveway. Here's how I see things, and maybe it's odd, but it's how I feel. I knew from the first time I saw you that I wanted you to be a permanent part of my life. It took me a while of watching you and getting to know you a little to realize that I hadn't just lost my mind. He took a deep breath. The past few weeks, getting to know you so much better, they've been a dream come true for me. Call me crazy if you want, but I see us spending our lives together as a never-ending adventure. I want to learn something new about you every day for the rest of my life. Miranda felt warmth spread through her body. I don't even know what to say to that. He shrugged. Think about it. I'll know better how we mesh after meeting your mom and you getting to know my sister and niece. What time do you want us at your house Christmas morning? Her eyes grew wider. You're planning to come to my house Christmas morning? Really? She hadn't even considered he might want to see her since he'd have family in town. Of course. Then we can all head over to the feast on the ranch. I love that the guests feed us one day of the year. It kind of makes me feel a little loved. He looked at her curiously. Were you really not planning on being together on Christmas? I guess it never occurred to me that you planned to. She frowned. I have to run that past my mom. In my family, Christmas has always been for immediately family. I wouldn't be surprised if my brother decided to come at the last minute. I agree. Christmas is for your immediate family. I feel like you're part of my family. He shrugged, looking away from her. He wasn't ready to pour his heart out to her yet. He had plans, and he was going to follow them if it killed him. Miranda watched him, unable to read his face, because he was partially turned away from her. I'll ask Mom if she'd mind if you guys came over. He reached over and squeezed the hand she had settled in her lap. Thank you. Let's go eat. I haven't had one of your burgers in days, and I think I'm going through withdrawal. He smiled at her, a sadness in his eyes. I'd better feed you then. I can't have my Miranda wasting away to nothingness. They didn't dirty any dishes, simply using the wrappers he'd packed the food in as their plates. As soon as she'd eaten her last bite, she stood. I'm going to get my nap. Are you sleeping on the couch again, or coming back to get me? I'm sleeping here, if you don't mind. Of course, I don't. She hurried off to her room, taking deep breaths. She knew she'd hurt him by not responding to him the way he wanted. She had feelings for him, but he was moving so fast. She felt like he was sweeping her away in a tornado. She slipped into bed, letting Cinnamon burrow under her cover, beside her. I hope you like Bob, because it looks like he's here to stay, she said quietly. Asterisk. Bob picked Miranda up at 2:30 the next morning. I'm going to help you until it's time for you to work, he said softly. I'd like that. Thank you for being so good to me this week. He shrugged. It's my job to take care of you. And my job to take care of you. She covered his hand on the gear shift, looking at the difference. Her hand was tiny in comparison with his. I'm ready for Christmas week to be over, so we can spend more time together. She looked at him with surprise. I feel like we're spending more time together now than we usually do. He nodded. Probably. But we're both exhausted from all the festivities, and working 10 times as hard as usual. He parked the car in the small lot next to the Old West town, turning to her. I miss the time we usually have together. You know, when we can kiss and shop and kiss and snowmobile. And kiss? She asked, laughing. I still carry my chapstick everywhere, ready for any sneak attacks that may come my way. He grinned. You're a wise woman, Miranda Sue. It's really Miranda Marie. Bob shrugged. Do you really think I'm going to change what I call you at this late date? She leaned toward him, her forehead against his shoulder. Probably not, but I do feel compelled to make sure you know my real name. He cupped her face in his hands, leaning down and kissing her softly. Let's go make muffins and cookies. And pies, she said with a groan. At least you don't open until 8. You have lots of time to bake your heart out. At his words, she realized she didn't have a heart to bake out any longer, because hers belonged to him. As they approached the bakery, she saw her gift waiting for her, and she hurried and picked it up before opening the door. He didn't ask what it was, and she wasn't sure if he'd even noticed it there. Would you mind baking the muffins again? You did great with that yesterday. I've made up the batter, but I made lots more than yesterday. I'm selling out of everything so fast it's ridiculous, and I don't have collages to fall back on today. I'm happy to make the muffins. He watched her to see if she'd open the gift, but when she didn't, he started on the muffins. He had only an hour to help her before he had to head to the cafe and the pregnant woman who would drive him mad all day. Miranda immediately pulled the cinnamon rolls she'd prepped the night before from the refrigerator and popped them into the oven, mixing up the cream cheese frosting she made for them. They worked together in companionable silence, and she realized as they worked it was one of her favorite things about Bob. They didn't have to be constantly talking. They could be in the same place and have their own thoughts. Bob finished the muffins, leaving them to cool on a wire rack before he had to leave. I'll pick you up after work. I don't want you driving this week. You're not sleeping enough. Miranda nodded. You're not getting any more sleep than I am. I know, but I know how I drive when I'm overtired, and I don't know how you do. He walked to her, kissing her forehead. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her lips to his. I'll miss you today, she said softly. Bob held her close for a long moment. I'll miss you too. See you after the work is done. Bake lots of cookies. I'm starting on cookies now. She stood quietly watching him leave before she pulled the gift out of her purse. She laughed as soon as she opened it. A cheeseburger. Now there was no doubt in her mind who the gifts were from. It was Bob. It had to be. No one else would think to give her a chigger or a burger for her charm bracelet. At 4, there was a tapping of keys on the front window, startling Miranda. The old west town was a bit eerie in the middle of the night when she was working alone. She walked to the door, peering out, before opening it wide. Kaya? What are you doing here? Pastor Kevin told me that you needed help baking cookies this morning. I finished my book yesterday, so I figured I'd help you out. Miranda hugged Kaya. Thank you. I feel like I keep needing to be rescued, but it's been a hectic week. Kaya grinned at her. It has been. Christmas here at the ranch is amazing, but so busy. Glenn's been taking people on sleigh rides during the day, which is fun, but he's exhausted too. I'll be here to help you for several hours. When are you going to sleep? Kaya shrugged. I got a good nap today or yesterday. I get confused on which day it is, but I'll be fine. Well, if you're here and willing, I'm going to put you to work. Let's get some cookies going. Pastor Kevin was there as soon as she opened, smiling when he saw Kaya working with Miranda. If it isn't my favorite sister-in-law. Kaya wrinkled her nose at him. Your only sister-in-law. That makes you the perfect pick for favorite, doesn't it? He reached for a clean apron and pulled it on, walking to the cash register. Same as we'd been doing, Miranda? Miranda nodded. Please. I appreciate all your help. I don't think I'd keep coming over if you didn't, Kevin said with a smile. With Kaya's help, Miranda was able to do a lot of the prep work for Friday quickly. Maybe tomorrow won't be so tough. I'm thankful you're here. Kaya shrugged. I need to do something to keep me out of trouble. Baking Christmas cookies is just the thing. Bob sent Joni, the new assistant manager of the cafe, over at noon with 3 boxed lunches. How did he know to send 3? Miranda asked, surprised. Maddie was here with her little girl, and she came to the cafe after. She told us there were 3 people working, so Bob made 3 lunches. Tell him thank you. I'd tell you to kiss him for me, but I'm not sure you could find lips on that big head of his. Joni laughed. I guess you heard I said that. Miranda nodded. Don't worry. I happen to agree with you. The man has a big head half the time. I love him though. She was surprised to even think the L word with as short a time as they'd been dating, but it was true. He was incredible. I have to get back. We're swamped there too, but we have easier access to lunch food. Not that I wouldn't eat cookies for a meal. Thank you. Miranda called after the waitress. You two eat, and I'll take the cash register, and then I get to eat. I promise not to burn the kitchen down, Kaya said with a grin. That's a promise that I greatly appreciate and will hold you to. Miranda went to the counter and took her turn serving people. Sheriff Shane was there looking sheepish. Hey, Sheriff. Hi, Miranda. Kelsey says little Widget is starving to death, and she needs a cinnamon roll. Widget? The names are getting worse every day. Please tell me you're working on talking her into calling the baby Tori. As she talked, she pulled out a cinnamon roll, wrapped it in bakery tissue, and put it in a bag. Anything for the father-to-be? Do you happen to have a baby names book behind the counter? Miranda laughed. There's always Google. Just the cinnamon roll then. I did know about her propensity for weirdness when I married her, so I can't say a thing. This is true. She handed him the bag and gave him a price. Give that wife of yours a hug for me. I've been so busy, I've barely seen her this week. I will. I think she's going to find you at the Christmas stroll tonight. You are going, aren't you? Miranda nodded. I'm excited. I love caroling. Should be fun. He raised his hand in a wave as he headed out the door, and Miranda turned her attention to the next customer. At least Christmas Eve would be mostly quiet. Chapter 9. Miranda drove herself home on Friday afternoon, because she knew her mother would arrive any moment. She had just let Cinnamon out into the backyard when she heard a knock at the door. Hurrying over, she found her mother waiting for her. Throwing her arms around her, she squealed happily. It's good to see you. Feels like it's been forever. To me too. Your brother's bringing in suitcases. I had a feeling he'd come with you. I'm glad we're all together for Christmas. Miranda led her mother inside, leaving the door open for Scott. Did he bring Hannah? Nah. Hannah is spending Christmas with her new boyfriend. Oh. What happened? I liked her. So did I. Apparently, Scott wasn't moving fast enough for her, so she broke it off. Her mother took off her coat and walked to the spare room. Do you want me to sleep with you? Or should we put Scott on the couch? Miranda grinned. I don't know if we should ask Scott to try to squeeze all 6 feet 4 inches of him onto the couch. It might be fun to watch though. Her mom laughed. I was thinking the same thing. So I'm sharing with you? Yeah. We can't torture him when he just broke up with his girlfriend at Christmas time. It wouldn't be right. Mom agreed. So what's going on in your life? Any men making an appearance? Miranda rolled her eyes. Her mother wanted grandchildren and made no bones about it. There is a man in my life. He wants us to do Christmas morning with him, his sister, and his niece. Really? Are you that serious? What's his name? Bob. We've been dating for less than a month, but, yeah, I think it's getting that serious. Miranda watched her mother's face as she said the name, knowing she'd recognize it from some of her rants on the phone. She was pretty sure she'd threatened to shove a cookie and maybe even a burger up Bob's nose while on the phone with her mother. Her mother frowned at her. Wait. You mean Bob is the man you're dating? It's a different Bob than the one you complain about every time we talk, right? Scott dropped the suitcases on the floor in the living room. There's a Bob in Miranda's life? He looked between his sister and his mother questioningly. Miranda blushed. It's the same one. He's different now. He's not still tormenting you because you put 12 chocolate chips per cookie and not 15? What? Is this guy insane? Scott asked. I may need to have a talk with him. No one needs to have a talk with Bob. He was teasing me to show me he liked me. He doesn't particularly understand women, but he's not a bad guy. Miranda sat down on the couch, and her mother sat beside her, while Scott took the chair. Are you guys okay with them coming over Christmas morning? Them? Scott asked. Bob, his sister, and his niece. Miranda shrugged. He assumed it would be okay, so I said I'd talk to you about it. She shook her head. Clueless sometimes, but truly a good man. Scott and Mom exchanged a quick glance. It's fine with me, Mom finally said. I want to meet him. He'll be at Christmas karaoke at the ranch tonight. You'll meet him then. Miranda looked at them. I need to go. I guess you guys could stay here, but I thought you'd probably rather go. She yawned behind her hand. And I need a nap before I go. I've been swamped all week, and sleep has been taken where it can be found. Mom nodded, waving a hand. Sleep. Of course we'll go tonight. Karaoke is fun. Miranda got up, walking toward the bedroom. I'll set an alarm and be up at 6 to go. Karaoke is in the restaurant, so we'll eat there if that's okay with you guys. Go sleep. If we get hungry, we know where the kitchen is. Cinnamon's outside. Don't make her stay out in the snow too long. Miranda shut the door behind her, falling into bed. At least she'd be able to sleep in until 6 on Christmas morning. Asterisk. Bob stayed at the ranch after work to get Annette and Heather to their cabin he'd reserved for them. They'd come in shortly before the cafe closed for the day, and Kelsey had them wait at the counter, chattering at them the whole time. Name? My husband and I can't seem to agree on a name. I'm thinking Widget, but he thinks that's too silly. He wants to name her Tori. Heather giggled. Widget? Who would name a baby Widget? Bob looked out and saw Kelsey put her hands on her hips. I would. I love the name. Bob bit his lip to keep from commenting. He'd learned early on that having an opinion about the names Kelsey liked for the baby was absolutely pointless. He wondered when the sheriff would come to the same conclusion. A short while later, Kelsey stuck her head into the kitchen. You're done. I'll make sure the kitchen is clean to your specifications. Go on. Bob glanced at his watch. It's 20 minutes till close. I know. I can handle cooking for 20 minutes, whether I like it or not. Go spend time with your family. Bob shrugged and pulled off his apron, going out to the front. He'd called hi from the kitchen, but hadn't seen Annette or Heather yet. He walked out into the dining room and leaned on the counter. Are you ladies ready to see your cabin? Annette nodded, getting to her feet. It didn't take us quite as long to get here as I thought it would. We left a little early to avoid the snow that's supposed to come tonight. That was probably smart. Bob looked at Heather. She was 6 now and getting big. Stop growing. Heather giggled. I can't do that, Uncle Bob. Why not? He snatched her off the stool and hugged her tight. I think you should still be in diapers and sucking your thumb. Are we staying with you? Heather asked, obviously thrilled to be held by one of her favorite people. Nope. I got you a cabin here on the ranch. My apartment is about as big as your average postage stamp, and there's no way a little girl could have fun there. Besides, the ranch is the place to be for Christmas. He set Heather on the floor and hugged his sister. Where's your car? Out front. Good, you can drive me over. I'll show you the way. What are the plans for the weekend? Annette asked. Tonight is Christmas karaoke in the main restaurant. We're meeting Miranda and her mom there. Annette stopped next to her car and stared at him. What? You finally got up the guts to ask that girl out instead of teasing her about her chocolate chips? Would you believe she didn't realize I was flirting with her? Bob, your flirting is like another man's hatred. I've told you a million times just to ask her out. I hope you asked her nicely and didn't tell her you were going to teach her to make a proper cookie or something. He shrugged. I kind of grabbed her and kissed her in my boss's kitchen. That works too, right? I love you, but sometimes I really worry about you. They got into the car, and he gave her directions to the cabin he'd chosen for her. It was a small 2-bedroom cabin just on the edge of the lake. The lake's pretty solid at the moment, but it's beautiful to look at. He gave her the keys to the cabin while he grabbed the suitcases from the back of the car. Go on in while I get this stuff. I think this one will be good for you too. It's called Lazy Lodge. A minute later, he followed them inside. Heather was running from room to room. I want this bedroom, Mom. Can I have this one? Annette looked into the room Heather wanted and nodded. That bunk bed makes it yours. I'll take the big boring bed in the other room. Thanks, Mom. Heather hugged her mother and climbed onto the top bunk. Bob grinned at his sister. I see you're making some major sacrifices today. Anything for my baby girl? He laughed. How would you feel if I crashed on your couch while you two settle in? I brought your suitcases in. I've been starting work at 3 every morning this week, and we're doing evening activities. Annette shook her head. No way. You're going to sleep in my bed. Do you want me to fix supper while you sleep? Bob shook his head emphatically. Like I'd eat your cooking. She rolled her eyes. You're such a snob, Bob. He shrugged. I'm not even ashamed of it. He yawned, covering his mouth. I'm going to sleep and I'll be out in a couple of hours. The restaurant is hosting karaoke, so we're going to eat there tonight. Sorry to be a bad host, but I'll make it up to you. Annette shrugged. Go sleep. Heather and I will be fine. We'll probably go for a walk and check out the place. Wait till tomorrow to go to the Old West town. Then you can get muffins from Miranda. Never thought I'd see my baby brother so hung up on a girl. Good night, Nettie. He felt no guilt for falling into bed and going straight to sleep. It was his sister, and she understood. Asterisk. When Miranda got to the restaurant with her mom and Scott, she looked around for Bob. She didn't see him, so she snagged a table for 6, collapsing into a chair. Elf sat down beside her. You singing tonight? She shook her head. Nope, but my mom might. Her eyes drifted past Elf to Bob, who was scanning the room, obviously looking for her. She lifted her hand, a smile on her lips. Elf looked behind him. Bob, huh? I wish you well. He got up and wandered away, and Miranda forgot all about him as Bob led his sister and niece to her table. Bob sat down next to Miranda, letting his sister and niece take the seats beside him. Miranda, this is my sister, Annette O'Brien, and her daughter, Heather. Miranda smiled at Annette. It's nice to meet you. Bob has said a lot about you. She nodded to her mother and Scott. This is my mom, Debbie White, and my brother, Scott. Hi, Scott said. Are you Bob? His eyes narrowed on the man his sister was dating. I am. I've heard a whole lot about you from Miranda. None of it good, I'm sure. Bob squeezed Miranda's hand under the table, silently laughing with her at the befuddled look on her brother's face. None of it. You've been a pain in her butt. Bob shrugged. Not anymore. She likes me now. Annette laughed. I don't know why. You're a good woman to put up with his flirting. I told him to ask you out months ago. Miranda looked at Bob, who had the good grace to look embarrassed. Yeah, Bob does things his own way, doesn't he? She squeezed his hand, letting him know the teasing was in good fun and not meant to be mean. Annette rolled her eyes. He's crazy. She looked at her daughter, whose eyes were wide as she took in the people all around her. This is going to be kid-friendly, right? Yes, it will. They do sell alcohol, but no one is allowed to get out of hand. Miranda nodded at a girl in a security uniform. Charlie will take care of anyone who misbehaves. No one takes her job more seriously than she does. Bob looked at the menu. Maybe we could do an appetizer sampler to share? Miranda shrugged. Sounds good. Annette nodded. Sounds good to me. So what's on the agenda for the weekend? You two are working tomorrow, right? Yeah, I work from 3 till 1 tomorrow. I'll go in with her and help for her first hour, and then I work from 4 till 1 at the restaurant. Long days, Annette said. They work you to the bone around here. Bob shrugged. Usually there's downtime. Christmas is our busiest time of the year though, and we're working hard. Miranda's mom looked at Annette. We should join forces tomorrow. I haven't been to the ranch before, and I'm looking forward to exploring. The idea of the old west town fascinates me. I'd love that. Heather and I are looking forward to exploring everything. Why don't we meet at 8? That's when things start moving around here, right? Miranda nodded. You can have breakfast at the cafe, and then come over and get a treat from me. There are sleigh rides in the morning if you want to give those a try. I made collages today, so make sure you eat before you come. Scott groaned. You should have saved collage day for me. You know I'd move heaven and earth for your collages. Miranda rolled her eyes. I can make a small batch for us on Christmas morning. What's a collage? Annette asked. I've never heard of them. It's this light, fluffy, buttery bread with either sausage and cheese or ham and cheese inside. So good. Scott looked at Miranda. Ham and cheese. I'm only making one kind, so everyone vote. I'm sleeping in on Sunday, and they take 4 hours, so they won't be ready till around 8. So that's what time we're coming over, right? Bob asked. At collage time? Bob knew he wasn't being subtle in his request to be included in the special breakfast. He ate her collages enough that he should be tired of them, but he never would be. Miranda looked at her mother. The men in my life only love me for my collages. Mom smiled. My daughter the baker. Who'd have guessed? By the time they split up for the night, everyone was comfortable with one another, and they'd settled on a time to meet up on Christmas morning. If you want, you can make special ornaments for someone. You can do it for a random person, or you can do them for someone you care about and swap them. Like Mom and Scott, you guys could each make one and give it to the other, Miranda suggested. When do we do that? Annette asked. Tomorrow night after the Christmas Eve service at our little chapel, Miranda explained. It's a Christmas tradition from the Weston family, who own the ranch. They settled here almost 130 years ago. Everyone on the ranch is included if they care to be. They all walked to the parking lot together. Bob held Miranda's hand and kissed her quickly, well aware everyone was watching them. You'd think a man never kissed his woman before. Good night, Bob, Miranda said softly, getting into the back seat of her mother's car. I'll see you at 3. He groaned. Don't mention 3. Just one more day of the craziness. We can do one more day, can't we? Miranda wasn't sure, but with Bob at her side, anything seemed possible. Chapter 10. Shortly after Miranda opened the doors to the bakery the following morning, Heidi, who managed the mercantile there in the Old West town, came in with an emergency. She ignored the line that a college student who helped out on the weekends was managing, and went straight to Miranda. Can I talk to you for a minute, Miranda? Miranda looked up from the cookies she was decorating for the tree lighting ceremony that evening. If you don't mind if I keep working while you talk. Of course not. Heidi took a deep breath. One of the families here on the ranch lost their house to a fire a few days ago. All of their presents are gone. They decided to stay on the ranch, rather than go home to nothing. I'm trying to get everyone to donate a present or two to the family. Miranda frowned. That's terrible. I have a couple of pies they could have. Are there children? Any little girls? There is a little girl. Why? I made a Minnie Mouse quilt for Kelsey's baby, but I have more than enough time to make another. It's already wrapped and in my car. Would that help? That would be wonderful. Are you sure? Positive. That and the pies? I can throw in any Christmas cookies that are left. Pies and the quilt are more than enough. Thank you. Miranda dug in her pocket for her keys. I'm sure I have the only beetle in the parking lot. That blue beetle is yours? Heidi asked, grinning. I'll bring the keys right back. Sounds good. As Heidi hurried off, Miranda smiled. It was nice to be able to do something special for a stranger on Christmas. Asterisk. After a very long day at work, Miranda and her family met up with Bob, Annette, and Heather at the church the following evening. Pastor Kevin and Bridget had spent the day getting the church ready, and it was beautiful. The service was held by candlelight in the small chapel that was a replica of the chapel that the first members of the Weston family who had lived on the ranch had married in. Pastor Kevin had done a great deal of research on the Weston family, and Kaya had promised her next book would be about the first Weston couple to live on the ranch. Each of them was given a candle as they filed into the church, and Pastor Kevin welcomed everyone individually. It was strange to have her mother on one side and Bob on the other for such an important service, but she was pleased to have him there. They sat in silence as Pastor Kevin took the pulpit and invited a small group of people to sing for them. They sang Away in a Manger, followed by Silent Night. When they were finished, Bridget went to the front corner of the church with a lit candle and encouraged everyone to light the candle of the person beside them. Bob held his candle to light Miranda's, and Miranda turned to light her mother's. Once all the candles were lit, Pastor Kevin gave a brief sermon on the meaning of Christmas. After 2 more songs that everyone sang together, Pastor Kevin announced they were going to pass out the Christmas ornaments. All 6 of the Weston siblings hurried around passing out wrapped packages. Every person in the church got at least one ornament. Miranda smiled as Kelsey handed her one, which was wrapped the same as all of her Secret Santa gifts had been. She held it in her lap with one hand, while she held the candle in the other. Once all the gifts had been passed out, Pastor Kevin made an announcement. We're all going to traipse out to the Christmas tree now. The tree we'll hang our ornaments on is the tree that the original Weston settlers decided they would not chop down, because they wanted future generations to enjoy it. There are 6 trash cans surrounding the tree that we will be putting our trash into instead of littering the beautiful ranch. If you want to take your ornament you receive, the Westons ask that you do that tomorrow after the feast the guests will prepare for the staff. Everyone here is welcome to attend the feast. He looked at Wade. Am I forgetting anything? I think that's good. Thanks for making the announcements for me, Pastor. Wade smiled at him. Follow me. Wade headed to the back door of the church and waited as everyone stood and followed him. Miranda was fascinated by the tradition of the tree lighting at River's End Ranch. She'd attended the year before, and it had been beautiful, but last year she'd felt like an outsider peeking in at someone else's Christmas tradition. This year, she felt like it was her tradition. At the tree, Bob held Miranda's candle as she unwrapped her gift, a smile on her face. She knew it was from Bob, and she had no idea what to expect, because Bob had proven himself the most unpredictable person she'd ever met. When it was open, a smile spread across her face. They had made each other basically the same ornament. She carefully counted the number of chocolate chips on the cookie-shaped ornament he'd given her, and laughed softly at the number. 15? It had to be 15. Bob leaned down and kissed her, ignoring their family who were opening their own ornaments close by. She took the candles as he opened his, and as soon as he realized she'd done the same thing he had, he laughed out loud. He turned it over in his hand, counting the chips. 12. Even in ceramic, you can't humor me? Once all the ornaments had been unwrapped, they were hung on the old pine tree in front of them. Wade was obviously in charge of this part of the service. Has everyone hung their ornament? He called. After he'd heard a chorus of yes, he called out, "Light me up, Andrew." "You got it, boss man." At the flick of a switch, the tree was lit with thousands of tiny bulbs. The top of the tree had been decorated earlier that day, and now that the bottom was done, the tree looked amazing. There was a concerted "ah" as soon as the lights came on. They stood around eating cookies and drinking hot apple cider for a short while, enjoying the Christmas tree, and slowly families trickled away. Miranda yawned, looking at Bob. "We get to sleep in tomorrow. You're still getting up at 4 to make collages." "That's not sleeping in. It is when you usually get up at 2. She looked over her shoulder and saw the others were following them as they made their way to their cars. "You'll be at my house at 8, right?" He nodded. "I put your name on the gifts I got for Annette and Heather, just so you know. I did the same with the ones I got for Mom and Scott." "Why did you have a gift for Scott? Wasn't he a surprise?" Bob thought the younger man had planned to spend the holidays with his girlfriend. "Yeah, but I was going to send a gift back with Mom for him, so I had one ready." Bob shrugged. "Makes sense, I guess." After a soft kiss, he said, "Good night. I'll see you in the morning." "But not till 8. He laughed. "Do you look the same that late in the day?" She smiled at him, tired but happy. "Good night, Annette." "Good night, Heather." Miranda rested her head against the back of the seat as her mother drove her home. She didn't know if she was glad it was almost over or disappointed. Christmas had truly been magical this year. The ranch's activities were fabulous, but when you added in the magic of Bob, it was truly special. Asterisk. Miranda slipped out of bed at 4, surprised when her mother followed her into the kitchen. "You should sleep in, Mom." "I can do this in my sleep. I'm helping, and that's all there is to it. We've been surrounded by people the whole time I've been here. It's time we got a few minutes to ourselves." Her mother took an apron off a hook in her kitchen and put it on. "Just tell me what to do." Together, they made the collages. They made ham and cheese, because they were favorites of both Bob and Scott, and the others hadn't had them. While they cooked, they talked. "It's got to be weird at home now that Scott and I are gone." "You should move closer," Miranda said. Her mom shrugged. "I don't know about that. It is odd, but you don't want your mother here." "Yes, I do. I hate to think that you're all alone." Mom sighed. "I do feel kind of alone. I should have dated and gotten out there, but you kids were number one in my life." "Move here, Mom. They're opening a child care center here on the ranch. You would be perfect to manage that." "I don't know. I was a pre-K teacher a very long time ago. I've been working in real estate for a lot of years. but you've never enjoyed it. At least put in an application with Wade. Her mother had sacrificed the job she loved and found a higher-paying one so she could support her family after Miranda's father's death. It was only fair that now her kids were grown, she got to do what she loved. I'll think about it. I wouldn't mind being close to you, and now that you and Bob are in love, I don't see you going anywhere else. Miranda frowned. We haven't exactly said those words to each other yet. It's just a matter of time. I'm surprised that boy hasn't given you a ring yet. It's obvious how he feels. They washed their hands and walked to the table to sit for a few minutes while the collages were rising. Miranda smiled. He's been leaving Secret Santa gifts for me. Miranda walked to her room and brought back the bracelet. I haven't put this week's charms on it yet, but this is what I have. She laid the bracelet on the table along with the loose charms. Oh, nice. What does the tiara one mean? And why is there a bug? Is the boy a little brain damaged? Miranda laughed. When he first told me he was interested, she began, leaving out the part about being kissed in Kelsey's kitchen, I thought he'd lost his mind. We'd been fighting for so long. So I asked if he had albino brain chiggers. That bug is a chigger. Did you really ask him that? Yes. I couldn't figure out what was going on in his head. From fighting to letting me know he was very interested in the course of a day. It made my head spin. He obviously thinks a whole lot of you, Miranda Marie. Hearing her real name sounded odd. He calls me Miranda Sue. Why? Miranda shrugged. There's no telling why he does most of what he does. I think that's what I love most about him. Her mother had tears in her eyes. I can't believe my baby is finally in love. You're just happy because you're closer to getting grandbabies, Miranda said with a grin. You definitely have a point. When Bob and his family arrived shortly before 8, the collages had just come out of the oven and were still warm. Food first? Bob asked, his eyes gleaming as he looked toward the collages, cooling on the counter. You made a lot. I made 2 dozen. I figured that would be enough for 6 of us. Mom helped, Miranda said with a smile toward her mother. After they'd had breakfast, they moved to the small Christmas tree Miranda had put up. I thought it was only going to be Mom and me, she said apologetically. We would be content with a small tree after going to the tree lighting at the ranch. Now I feel bad that I have 6 people with a 2-foot Christmas tree. Don't, Annette said. The tree at the ranch was amazing. And this is all we need after that. Heather knelt in front of the tree. That's a baby tree. I like it. She looked at the presents under the tree. Can I pass them out? Sure, Miranda said. She remembered when Scott had always passed out gifts. It was his favorite part of Christmas. Everyone had a small pile in front of them when Heather had finished passing out presents. Do we all go at the same time? Or one at a time? Heather asked. She was all but dancing with excitement. Her pile was the biggest of all. You go first, Miranda said. Her favorite part of Christmas was watching people open things she'd gotten them. She'd done a surprise order from Amazon when she'd found out that she would be spending Christmas with Heather and Annette, so she had gifts for everyone, even though she knew Bob didn't expect her to. After Heather had opened her pile of dolls and Barbie gear, Scott opened his gifts. After Scott, Bob urged Miranda to open hers. She looked down at her pile for the first time, seeing something that was obviously Christmas pajamas from her mother, and probably a quilt as well. Her mother was always worried that she was going to freeze in the winter if she didn't make her a blanket of some sort. There was a small box that looked like all the other charm boxes she'd gotten over the past couple of weeks. She picked up the charm box first. I can't wait to see which charm you thought would be right for Christmas morning, she said. The chigger is my favorite so far. Bob grinned. No idea what you're talking about. Of course not. She peeled the paper off and opened the jeweler's box, startled when she saw the beautiful heart-shaped diamond she'd admired in the store. This isn't a charm for my bracelet, Bob. The jeweler must have told him her favorite and clued him in on her size as well. Unbelievable. He got off the couch, where he'd been seated beside her, and dropped to one knee in front of her. No, it's not a charm. He took a deep breath. Miranda Sue, I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love another human being. Will you marry me, so we can spend the rest of our lives creating the perfect chocolate chip cookie together? Miranda laughed, even as she felt a tear slip down her cheek. She nodded. Cookies are everything. They are. He slid the ring onto her hand and stood, pulling her to her feet and kissing her. Everyone's staying until tomorrow afternoon. We should get a marriage license in the morning and talk Pastor Kevin into marrying us in the afternoon. She laughed. Tomorrow? Only you would ask me to marry you and then try to talk me into tomorrow. He shrugged. Why not? I love you and want to spend my life with you. Why waste time? I'd say today, but I don't think we could manage the license. Miranda looked at her mother, who was watching with a grin on her face. Mom? You want to see me get married tomorrow? Yes. Soon they were all hugging, and Miranda realized they hadn't finished unwrapping gifts. You have to open your present from me. Bob sat down and reached for his gifts, opening the one from her. Inside was an apron and a cookbook with cookie recipes. He laughed and set it aside. She stopped him. I want you to read the inside cover. He opened the cookbook, a frown on his face, and his eyes widened as he looked at her. You gave me your collatch recipe? She nodded. I thought it would be special. Thank you. She was right. Receiving her best recipe was everything to him. Asterisk. It wasn't hard to talk Pastor Kevin into marrying them the following day. He even filled in for Miranda while she hurried to get the marriage license. The wedding was simple, though many of the ranch staff attended. Pastor Kevin smiled as he performed the ceremony. Their vows were unusual, but they were written by Pastor Kevin himself. Miranda, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To love, honor, and bake collages until death do you part? Miranda laughed, even as the tears coursed down her cheeks. I do. And do you, Bob, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to love, honor, and bow to her superior knowledge of chocolate chip cookies till death do you part? Bob nodded, his eyes lighting up his face. He took her hand and slid on the wedding band he'd picked out. I do. I really do. I now pronounce you Baker and Bob. Bob, kiss your bride. Bob swept Miranda into a kiss that she readily returned, her heart full. She looked down at her new niece, who had served as flower girl. I think I'm going to keep your uncle. Heather nodded. You have to keep me too, Aunt Miranda. Forever. Miranda couldn't believe how much her life had changed in less than a month, but she couldn't be happier. Obviously, Rivers End Ranch had its own form of Christmas miracles. For two people like her and Bob to find their way to fall in love, there had to be miracles at work. And she was extremely thankful for all of them.